I can't tell you how much I sympathise with the way everybody has had to endure this unbelievably testing and challenging time.
Camilla reportedly collapsed the second the Privy Council made it official. And the detail nobody's talking about? The transfer documents were allegedly signed days before she ever walked into that room. That single fact turns a routine handover into something far messier, because routine transitions don't end with someone collapsing. They don't end with someone being helped out of a private council chamber while the outgoing monarch just sits there watching. According to insiders, William didn't celebrate either. He reportedly gripped the edge of the table, held his breath, and turned to his father like he'd just been handed something he wasn't ready to open. That's not a ceremony, that's a rupture. And before we get into why the timeline doesn't add up, subscribe now, because this story is unfolding faster than the palace can control it. Here's the official story. The Privy Council formally acknowledged William's accession as a planned, orderly transition. Calm, expected, clean. But sources close to the family claim the monarch's signature on the transfer document was dated several days earlier, which means Charles had allegedly already set the process in motion while Camilla still believed she had time to change his mind. She reportedly thought she was walking into a discussion. She was actually walking into the aftermath of a decision already made without her. That's allegedly why her legs gave out. Not shock over William's new title, but the realization that the one person she thought she could still influence had quietly written her out of the process entirely. Rewind 6 days. Camilla reportedly met Charles privately at Windsor and asked him to delay the transfer by a year, arguing it would weaken him before he was emotionally ready to step back. Charles allegedly didn't argue. He just listened, closed the folder she'd brought to make her case, and told her this could no longer be handled as a family matter. That same night, he reportedly contacted the officials responsible for starting the council process. By morning, the paperwork was already done. So when Camilla walked into that room, the outcome had already been decided days earlier, and she was, according to these accounts, the only person in her position who didn't know it yet. What makes this colder is that Charles reportedly didn't move to help her up. He set his pen down, watched his son, and let her be escorted out. That's not a man caught off guard. That's a man who had already made peace with what was coming. William, for his part, allegedly didn't know the exact date either. Charles reportedly kept him out of the final scheduling on purpose, so no one could later claim William pushed his own father out. Noble intention, maybe, but it meant William inherited the crown with almost no time to prepare emotionally. And when he finally spoke, he didn't ask about power. He reportedly asked his father one question: "Are you certain?" Charles allegedly never answered that directly. He just smoothed the papers in front of him and said their personal feelings weren't the priority anymore. William asked about certainty. Charles answered with duty. Two very different things. And the fact that he couldn't simply say yes tells you how conflicted this decision truly was. Now here's where it turns personal. After being helped out of the chamber, Camilla reportedly confronted William privately, no staff, no advisors. She asked if he genuinely believed she'd tried to stop him from becoming king. According to the account, William said that wasn't what bothered him. What bothered him was that she'd tried to stop his father from letting go. He allegedly told her there's a difference between protecting someone and controlling their ability to release something. A line that reportedly landed hard, because it was true. Camilla had convinced herself she was defending Charles. What she was actually defending was her own position. Then she reportedly asked something bigger, whether Catherine's growing role had sped up the timeline. William, allegedly stunned by the question, told her Catherine knew nothing about the final date and had no part in the decision. That answer allegedly demolished the theory Camilla had been building. She wanted someone to blame: Catherine, William, an advisor, anyone. But the truth was simpler and far harder to accept. Charles had made this decision completely alone. That's reportedly the part she couldn't recover from. She'd spent decades watching him wait for this throne. She assumed he'd never let it go willingly, and definitely not without telling her first. When he did exactly that, it didn't just cost her influence, It allegedly shattered how well she thought she actually knew her own husband. This was never just a constitutional story, it was a marriage story. Meanwhile, the institution kept moving with or without her. By the next morning, William's office was reportedly already handling sovereign duties. Briefings were rerouted. Approvals that once needed Charles now needed William. Camilla allegedly showed up for a routine schedule meeting and found it had quietly vanished from her diary. Her secretary explained that William's sign-off was now required. She reportedly stared at the empty time slot, closed the diary, and asked to be left alone. That small, unannounced detail apparently hit harder than the official statement itself, because nobody had to say anything out loud. The calendar simply changed underneath her. Charles reportedly understood exactly how isolated she felt, and he chose not to intervene, because stepping in on day one would have undercut William before his reign even began. So he offered her comfort privately while leaving the public structure exactly as it now stood. A quietly brutal position for everyone involved. But William reportedly did something few expected. He instructed his staff directly. Camilla is not to be humiliated. Her team stays intact. This is not retaliation. Sources say he wanted a clean transition, not a vengeful one. When Camilla allegedly heard about that order, she was stunned. She'd braced for punishment and got protected dignity instead, a very specific, very deliberate kind of power move that reportedly made her question whether she'd misjudged him from the start. Not long after, William asked for a private meeting. No staff, no documents, just the two of them. And this is reportedly where the story stops being political and becomes something else entirely. He allegedly told her that becoming king hadn't felt like winning. It felt like watching a piece of his father quietly disappear while everyone around him expected celebration. He'd spent his whole life preparing to sit on that throne, but never once prepared himself to stand there while power actually left his father's hands. Camilla, for the first time, reportedly didn't argue about protocol. She admitted the truth instead. She was afraid of what happens to a man once the identity that defined him for decades is suddenly gone. Watching Charles wait that long and then let go that fast felt, to her, like watching him disappear too. William allegedly let her finish, then told her something she didn't expect. He wasn't going to erase her place beside his father. Her formal influence would shrink. The structure demanded that much. But her relationship with Charles wasn't something a title could touch. He reportedly wanted the transition to be firm, not cruel. And in that moment, Camilla allegedly admitted something she hadn't said out loud before, that defending Charles had quietly turned into resisting a future she was personally terrified of. Not a power grab. Fear. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Fear of losing the man she loved to a role that could consume him entirely. Outside the palace walls, the public story had already moved on without any of this context. Broadcasters called it a remarkable, graceful generational shift. The palace released a carefully worded statement about continuity and unity, but that careful wording was reportedly doing a lot of quiet work, because inside the family, everyone was still emotionally catching up to something that had already been legally finalized days earlier. Charles allegedly barely watched the coverage. He turned off the broadcast and asked about William's first official schedule instead, not his own legacy, not his own reputation, his son. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds reportedly gathered, chanting William's name. One newspaper held above the crowd read "William is King" in massive letters, and just beneath it, a smaller photo, Charles quietly leaving his final meeting as sovereign. Celebration and grief on the same front page. William allegedly felt that imbalance the entire day. Catherine reportedly told him he didn't have to pretend it was painless, that he could carry the weight of duty without pretending the personal cost wasn't real. Then came the moment that apparently mattered most. Before William's first public appearance, Charles reportedly met him privately, adjusted his son's jacket, stepped back, and told him he no longer needed permission to lead. William didn't say anything back. He allegedly just hugged his father. And for one quiet second, the relationship mattered more than the crown ever could. Camilla reportedly joined them shortly after. No officials, no cameras. She admitted her collapse was never only about losing influence. It was the realization that an entire shared life had just ended in a single sentence. Charles allegedly took her hand and told her they wouldn't lose their life together just because they'd lost the crown. Whether she fully believed that is impossible to know, but in that moment, according to the account, it was enough. So here's where it actually lands. Camilla's institutional power reportedly shrank, but she wasn't erased. Catherine stood beside the new king. Charles stepped back on his own terms. And the crown transferred not through defeat, but through one generation choosing to let go and the next choosing to carry it forward. This allegedly wasn't a coup, and it wasn't a betrayal. It was one man deciding the monarchy needed certainty more than it needed his continued grip on the throne, and everyone around him reacting in painfully human ways. Camilla collapsed because she'd reportedly been shut out of the biggest decision of her husband's reign. William hesitated because he understood exactly what he was inheriting. Charles stayed silent because he'd already made peace with the loss before anyone else even knew. And the institution kept moving regardless, because palace machinery doesn't wait for anyone's emotions to catch up. It just needs the next signature, the next briefing, the next approval. Zoom out, and this was never really about a title. It's about what that title reportedly cost everyone standing in that room. Charles lost the identity that had defined his entire life. Camilla lost the access her position had been built around. William gained a crown and instantly felt its full weight pressing down on the one relationship that mattered most to him. The title is official, the power is real, but according to insiders, the emotional fallout was still unfolding long after the cameras packed up and the crowds went home. And that's allegedly why the timeline matters so much. The signature dated days early. The private argument at Windsor Camilla thought she could still win. The announcement she reportedly never saw coming. None of it, according to these accounts, was accidental. Charles had already decided. He just hadn't told the people standing closest to him. William is king. Charles is no longer sovereign. Camilla is still standing, but the ground beneath her has apparently shifted for good, and reportedly, no one warned her it was even moving. The palace wants the world to believe this was smooth, but according to those closest to the family, it wasn't. And right now, the silence coming out of those private rooms is reportedly louder than any official statement they've released.